Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. This is our final webinar of our fall series with Dr. Yako, and it's a very special webinar. It is a brand new writing workshop that he's developed just recently for this event, and is super excited to offer this to you for the first time. So I guess I'll start with just a few announcements. We don't have audio enabled right now, but when we get to the question and answer period, if you'd like to interact and if you'd like us to enable audio, you can just raise your hand, and we're happy to do that and open up the forum for conversation. Otherwise, you can post your comments and questions in the Q&A channel or in chat. And we will have some questions throughout the presentation that will ask you to make comments and interact via chat with responses to questions that Lewis has included in his webinar. So if you have any questions even now, you can post them. This will run, I think, a little bit over 1 hour, and just depending on the questions and the interaction. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce my colleague, Dr. Yako, and achieving success in university and career readiness. He holds a bachelor's in arts in English, literature, linguistics, and translation from the College of Languages at Baghdad University, a master's degree in English from Lehigh University in Pennsylvania, and a PhD in cultural anthropology from Duke University in North Carolina. Lewis focuses on higher education in the Middle East and has conducted extensive research at both public and private universities in the region. He's taught and worked with American and international academic institutions and NGOs for many years. And he grew up in Iraq. He has lived and traveled to many countries around the world and loves to help students find their inner voice and explore meaningful and creative ways to align their passion with new academic and career opportunities. So I'm going to hand it over to Lewis, and we're going to begin the mastering of the art of writing.
Well, thank you so much, Tiffany, for this kind introduction, and welcome everybody. I am really, really excited. I have to say this is probably one of my favorite topics, and so I am a little biased in how excited I am because I really value writing and thinking, what we call the life of the mind, and how do we do it? What does it mean to us? And why does it matter in any shape or form? Because writing is not just to sit and write creatively or to write stories, which is a very big and important thing, of course, but it's a way of life. So what does it mean for that? And today we will cover multiple areas where I think will be of importance for you. So welcome again, and thank you so much for being here. And I would like to start the first slide. My colleague Tiffany will kindly also help me with the slide, so I'm grateful for that. Very grateful. And I don't want you to be scared about my big mug because I love tea so much. So if you're a tea lover, then you are immediately my friend. If not, forgive me and don't be scared. And please feel free to write any thoughts, insights, or questions or anything in chat all the time, because we will be capturing those as we move on. So I want to start with the very simple questions. And the simplest questions in life are actually the most difficult, because sometimes a simple question takes a lot of thinking and preparation to know who are you, where are you going, and what is your place in life. And with that, there's a very old Sudanese proverb that I really like. It says, every child should be given wings and roots. And I love this very much because wings allow us to fly and know how to fly, know when to fly and where. Or sometimes even if we don't know where to fly, the fact that we have wings is a huge power for us as humans. So wings is a sign of freedom, and it comes with thinking and learning the art of living. And language and writing is a very big part of the art of living. So every child should be given wings, but also roots. Roots are important because roots and wings, they seem contradictory, but they are not actually. Roots teach us how to root, how to make a home wherever we go, how to find home, and how to care and value certain things about our lives, about our community, our environment, our country, our people. So wings and roots are very important. And I feel that to be a writer is to know how to master this dance of having wings and roots. And so with that, what are we going to cover today? The next slide, I will talk about what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about where it all began. How did art writing began, in history? And I'll be very brief about that. It's just to give us a sense why it matters and why do we write? And of course, I will be engaging you and asking questions. Why do we write? And we will talk about the power of language and stories. There's a great power in that. We will cover the main types of writing. And the big question that many of us ask ourselves all the time, or from time to time, what kind of writing should I master? What kind of writing is right for me? And then we will also talk about other specifics. So until this moment in the webinar, I'll be talking a lot about creativity and creative writing. So that will be a very big focus. And then I will move into talking about other kinds of writing, like academic writing or technical/professional writing, which are their own form of writing. But in a way, it's not impossible to combine all of them and build a seamless connection between those kinds of writing. We will also talk about considerations for writing, for technical writing, key differences between academic and technical writing, and then we will talk about the 5 C's of good writing. And this will cover different forms of writing, not just technical or academic. And we will end with some classical traps that many writers fall into and how to avoid those traps. And then, of course, we'll open it up to questions and answers. I'm looking at the chat and looking at all of you coming from different countries, so welcome. And I'm so happy to see all this beautiful representation. So before I begin, and I will be asking you a question to share, I also want to say, I want to have a reminder, a very small reminder, that this webinar is in English, and that's important. Obviously, most of you probably don't speak English as a first language, or they speak English as a language, but then you speak other languages, or you speak French. We speak different languages. So the very fact that this webinar is in English is something to also consider, is that a lot of the things I say, they may or may not apply 100% to your context or to how you see and how you sense the world. And the first important thing about writing and thinking and being in this world is to acknowledge and to respect how each one of us experiences this world. And we experience this world in different languages, in different senses, with different eyes and different windows. And so that matters. And that's a way of understanding. The writer Bernard Shaw beautifully says, the biggest illusion about communication, the biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has happened or it has taken place. So very often we think we're communicating well, but are we? And so what I really would like to do as part of everything I say, as a reminder that I like to decolonize, because the colonial effect of how language works, of how, for example, English works, is very big. And we need to decolonize it. What does it mean? Why do we say the things we say? Who decides this language is more powerful than other, or this literature is better than others? And that these are very big questions if we are going to decolonize and empower ourselves, so that we use language as a pair of wings, not as a prison, because language could be a prison if we don't critically think about why we say the things we say, why we write the way we write. Who decided that this is a good way of writing an article and this is a bad way? Who decided that this is how poetry should be, right? So we need to be very critical about that and to find ways to contribute to knowledge. I think a big part of being trapped in language, of being trapped in thinking, is to see ourselves as users, not as creators. And language opens the door of us not only being users, but to create, to find new ways of doing and writing and sensing the world. So that's something I hope I wanted to acknowledge, because it will be very important thread in everything that we're going to talk about. So let's move to the beginning, which is, I would love to hear from you right away. I would love for you to share with me in chat, in a couple of sentences, what does writing mean to you? So just tell me in chat again, and we will be reading and engaging with each other. What does writing mean to you? And you don't have to worry or think too much. There is no right answer. When you think about writing, what do you think? What is the value or the meaning of writing? So please share in a couple sentences, what does that mean to you? Because it's a great moment for us to see where we are and to learn from each other. And again, I want to welcome all of you. I'm so happy you're here. Writing is a way of expression. It's sharing knowledge with others. Absolutely. It's means expressing ideas. Exactly. Express myself, communicate ideas and concepts. I love that. And it's a lot of sharing knowledge. Absolutely. Expressing knowledge, understanding, to communicate. Yes. It means communicating with my mind. Yes, absolutely. Writing means that change can be affected, or it can be made. Yes, you can make change, right? It's a way of expressing thoughts. Exactly. Capturing experience, sharing ideas, a bridge to understand myself and others. A bridge, absolutely. The bridge of alphabet, right? It's a style of communication and expressing views. It's a style out of many. I like that, of course. It's a way of sharing my imagination and fantasies. Absolutely. Thoughts, sharing thoughts with others. It's powerful. And thank you all. I'm loving all of this. You're writing all. I love it. It's a powerful means of communication, art of expressing yourself. Absolutely. So yes, to inform. Yes, yes. It's a way of sharing, right? And I would say also, it's one of you says it's a way to approach challenges and issues or situations. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm still looking. To communicate, to inform. So you see, all of us are, have all these different ways of valuing writing, but there are a lot of commonalities, a lot of common ways of thinking about it. It's a way to heal our souls. Absolutely. It's a way of healing. I love this. And actually, we will talk about this at some point. It's a way of telling the untold stories that people need to know about. And I love this. And I need to remind you also, not only in writing, for example, oral history, the power of it, it's equal. There are many ways to tell stories. And not one is superior over the other. Every way of telling a story, whether I tell it orally and it moves from person to person, they all matter. They're all powerful, and they should all be taken seriously as serious forms of knowledge and conveying stories. So thank you so much for sharing these. Continue sharing if you have other thoughts as we talk. And, we're going to go to the next part about this. We will begin talking about this and the history of writing in the next slide. So where did writing all begin? Now, interestingly, writing actually began, it was always said that it began in what we call Mesopotamia, the land between the two rivers, which is Iraq today. But also we know from research, and some anthropologists have done work, that at least different forms of writing have existed in different parts of the world and in different times. Now, of course, this is, we know today that it was invented by Sumerians in Mesopotamia, Iraq today, but it might have been invented independently in different places. The Sumerians started with the cuneiforms in Mesopotamia around 3,400 before Christ. Now, the Chinese characters in China date back to 1200 BCE, and the Mayans, the glyphs in Mesoamerica date back to 300 BCE. And so, again, independently, writing existed in more than one place. in today's world, right this moment, the Chinese script is the only unbroken living tradition of writing that continues as it is. And the Sumerians initially, they invented writing, interestingly, as a means of long distance communication, which was necessitated by the trade at the time. Now, it's very interesting that trade was one of the early needs, and the long distances and communicating between different people who are doing trade that necessitated the importance of writing, right? So I thought I will just say this as a historic background about writing. Just it's very interesting to know how writing existed in more than one place. And now we're going to move to talk about why do we write, and what writers have said about writing, because I think sometimes having a little bit of a survey or a little bit of a tour about what writers have said about writing is very interesting. It's very insightful. I've put some reasons about why we write, but there are many, and some of you expressed already some reasons. And as I speak, I would be happy for you to continue to share about why do we write. And I'll be reading some specific texts from writers who told us why do we write. So I've written a lot, and I've experimented with different formats. I've written poetry, essays, articles, academic articles, books, of course. I 2 books. One of them is a poetry collection. And I like to think that, from my experience, I call it my practice in writing, is that whatever you write, you can think of it as a soul, and that soul chooses the right body of itself. So personally, I'm against the idea of restricting your writing. Oh, this has to be an essay. Oh, you have to write a book. There's no have and must in writing. What is important is the process of thinking. And I love the notion that writing, when you begin writing, you begin from something you know. But as soon as you begin, you enter things that you didn't know. So begin from what you know into what you don't know. Because as soon as you begin writing, you begin discovering. Even the thoughts you thought you knew well, as you begin writing them, you begin doing the writing, and then writing will do you, in the sense that it will immediately change you and show you discoveries that you never thought they would come. And this applies to creative writing, but it applies to many different forms of writing. When you write a short story, you begin by creating a certain character in that short story, and you want that character to do a certain thing, but the character develops and it comes back to life. And sometimes it's against your will as the writer, the character will do its own thing. Sometimes you want a character to compromise. You want the character to go do something bad, but the character can be more ethical than the writer sometimes, and they choose in a moment not to do something. That's because a character has its own life. And this goes back to language. One of the most important things about language is not to think of it as something we take like clothes or furniture from our ancestors or from our parents. Language is a living creature. It's millions of living cells. And those cells are always renewing themselves. And those cells, because they are living, they're alive, they can be nourished, they can be malnourished, depending on how we feed them and how we use them. And very often we inherit language from ancestors and use it blindly and critically. In many languages that I speak, we say we fall in love. Okay, languages express it that way. But if I'm loved, why am I falling? Why don't we say I stand in love, right? So this is what it means to begin to be critical about, not just to take the language that comes automatically to us, but to begin to think why we say I fall in love. We say, I tolerate a medicine, and we need to tolerate refugees. Why should we use the same word to tolerate medicine, to tolerate a chemotherapy, and to tolerate a refugee? That seems a little too much. It doesn't seem very precise, right? But perhaps because we humans are imprecise, and so that's why the language is a reflection of us. But nevertheless, thinking about it carefully is what makes a writer. It makes us different. There's a philosopher who says, creativity is it's to use common words to say uncommon things. And sometimes you can use very common words that everybody is using, but putting them together to say uncommon things. Another writer said, everything has been said, but because nobody was paying attention, we have to say it all again. We have to start over. And the way we say it again, it has to be a different organization and arrangement of things so that it will capture people's attention. Another British writer tells us that, like a dice, I keep rolling the dice. I use words like a dice. I keep rolling them in my hands and throwing them, hoping to get a different combination each time. It is the combination of words that can make you say something very different. Even if it's not new, it will be said with a new spirit, because language is a living creature. So like a dice, you roll them in your hands and try to come with a combination that has not been said in that way. And that's very important. Going back to the slide, writers have said, we write to recover. I remember one of you saying beautifully, to heal. So we write to remember and we write to forget. We remember what happened, and it's important to remember that. It's important to share it with others, because remembrance can really teach us the art of living. It teaches about experience, but also to forget. Sometimes we write to forget the pain of what happened, and ironically, we forget it by writing it. And the writer Anais Nin in her memoirs beautifully says, writers experience life twice, once when it happens and once when they put it on paper. So there's something very beautiful about living more than once. And I would say you create life 3 times in writing: once by living it, when you live it, once when you put it on paper, and once when others read it, you share that life with them. So I'm taking that further and saying 3 times. Others have said we write to create a tolerable world for ourselves and others. The world is harsh. It's full of pain, hate, racism, wars, pain, unkindness, poverty, you name it. I mean, I don't have to go with a long list of what horrors we have in this world. And writing can help us, or even telling us stories. I always want to remind you that telling a story, even orally, is equally as powerful. So we write to create a tolerable world for us and for others. Why? Because as we said, it's healing. We heal and others heal when we read. So writers have often talked about how you create another world when you write, a more tolerable one, of course. I don't like creating the best world, as people like to use the cliche, let's make the world better. I'm not for that cliche, because there's a little bit of arrogance to think that I'm the one who's going to make the world better. All I want is to make it just a little bit less painful than it was when I found it. So I feel that's my ambition. We write to challenge and object what's going on. And I think I already mentioned a lot how things go, and we challenge and say it. One Syrian writer beautifully says, I understood the game early, and I'm paraphrasing her. I understood early the game, and I decided I found that I had 2 choices, either to die in silence like millions of people, or to scream through writing. And she uses scream, not necessarily literally scream, but writing is a vocal way of objecting what's going on. So of making sure that the other option is not the case, that we die in silence. And so writing comes away, or telling the story is a way. And I said already, we write to remember and to forget. Sorry, go back to the slide. Some writers have said to create a home when all else is lost. In many contexts of war and genocides, where there's a lot of violence, many writers have expressed, and actually, I don't have right now in front of me, but when I was a PhD student, I did a whole survey of writers from all over the world, and I collected, it's going to be long, I can't obviously say it right now here, but I collected what many writers in different countries have said when they experienced exile, war, and violence. And I found a thread. The pattern is many writers say, when everything gets lost, when even your home gets destroyed, you write to create a home. So I love that idea that writing is a home. You create a home, another home. George Orwell, who famously wrote 1984 and other novels, The Animal Farm, he says, in the end, and I'm paraphrasing, you discover that all you have is the few cubic centimeters in your head. What that means is that this is the real home. This is the real possession in life that you have, your brain, how to think, how to see, and how to sense the world. Because everything could get lost. Your furniture could burn, your house could get lost, you could lose your car, anything could get lost. But as long as you're breathing, then you have this. And these few tiny cubic centimeters matter very much, not only for writing, but simply for living. And as long as you keep them and preserve them and feed them, then you can say that you are learning the art of life. And then we write to experience life more than once. And I told you what Anais Nin have said. And I would like to read for you a few passages from writers about this before moving to the next slide. The first one is from an Algerian writer, Ahlam Mustaghanemi, and I start reading. Before, I thought we could write about life only when we have recovered from our wounds, when we were able to touch sores with a pen and not revive the pain, when we can look back free from nostalgia, madness, and a sense of grievance. But is this really possible? She says, is this really possible? As we are never completely cut off from memory. Recollection provides the inspiration for writing, the stimulus for drawing, and for some, the motivation even for death. So we write, we do music, we paint, all because we want to remember. But some of us even die because of shocks of living, the writer says. This is from Memory in the Flesh, 1993. The novel was published in 1993. Graham Greene says, writing is a form of therapy. Sometimes I wonder how all those who do not write, compose, or paint can manage to escape the madness, melancholia, the panic and fear which is inherent in the human situation. So if you write and if you love writing, do not be shy to share in chat, of course, how do you write and what does it mean to you in light of everything that we're saying in creative writing. And the last thing I'll read is from a poet. Her name is Naomi Shihab Nye. It's from a poetry collection called You and Yours. She says, possibly I began writing as a refuge from our insulting first grade textbooks. They say, come Jane, come look, come Dick, come look. Were there ever duller people in the world? Why you had to tell them to look at things? Why weren't they looking to begin with? I like this because, again, how to use common words to say uncommon things, right? So these are some insights from writers, and I hope you found them meaningful. And if they resonate with you or you have different ways of approaching it, please share. Thank you very much. We're going to move to the next slide.
Did you want any comments on this before moving on?
If people want to share about what writing means to them in the sense, so please do that. I see something. Can you highlight a bit on unbroken living tradition, a typical practical example of how others have been broken? Well, this question I will answer at the end. Nana, I see your question, so we will be talking about it. And here I share something that I wrote in 2019 in an article called Language as a Prison. Why do we fall in love? And I would like to read it for you quickly. Sorry, 1 second. I'm just trying to get to it from my side. So language is a living being that grows and dies. It can be healthy, sick, nurtured, or malnourished. It all depends on those using it. Just as in you are what you eat, it is even more precise to say you are what you say, what you read, and what you write. Language can turn into a prison or a set of wings that can help us fly. It all depends on how we use it to challenge, expand, and question every single word we utter or write. Language is the beginning and the end of what makes us human. The language we do remains alive way after we depart this world. Language is in our mother's first lullaby. The mother sings for us. The first time we tell someone, I love you. And we often talk about the significance of someone's last words before they died. Therefore, we cannot decolonize anything, least of all knowledge production, if we do not examine why we say things the way we say and how we get to internalize and express the things that shape our lives. In fact, language is truly the only home that remains when, even in exile, when all else is lost. So I thought I will read this sort of in combination of everything that we've been saying. Moving to the next thing. And so here, I would like to move to the next part, which is, sorry, I'm looking here. Whether you write for living or live for writing. And I'll come back to your comments, everybody. I see a nice comment, so let me read it. Personally, in addition to the above reasons, I believe writing is a tool for creating awareness and educating the world in order to initiate a positive social change. Absolutely. And thank you so much for writing that. So not all of us want to be writers or poets, of course, but we all need writing one way or another, or writing comes, or we all live through writing. We read things, we engage with the world with language, right? And so I say, whether you write for living or live for writing, there are a few things to really consider in your life, even if you're not a writer. And this is where we enter the territory of the different forms of writing. And sometimes, even if I don't want exactly to do writing, I find myself in a job or in a situation where I need or having really good writing skills can make a huge difference. So there are a few things to consider when you are in that situation, regardless of how writing is working in your life or how it's functioning, or what is the role of writing. The first one is to think of writing as a discipline and way of life, not a luxury, that is. Even creative writings, I say you have to be creatively disciplined, meaning that you are creative and you say what you want to say and think deeply, but a form of discipline on how to do it and how to take notes and when to sit and put it on paper, right? That is very important, because I really believe in the idea that half a good idea on paper is much better than a wonderful idea that is just in your head and you might easily forget. And so then, no matter how creative you are, and you can go as far as you want, because creativity is to go very far, right? But you have to have a creative discipline and know how to do it and not to miss the ideas. So I have a recorder, a small one. I walk and I record immediately if I have a really important idea, because the best ideas, they come from living, not from sitting on a table and looking from the window at a beautiful view. In fact, I say, when I sit to write, I'm not writing, I'm typing. The writing has already happened in my head, or has already been formed, in the sense that it's been living in my head and now it needs to be put on a paper. And of course, as you put it on paper, there's a discovery. Things come that you never expected. But that's what I mean, that you have to be creatively disciplined. Take notes. I always have a notebook with me at all times, on buses, on planes, on trains. And I always open it and write. And some people look at me like, where did this come from? Suddenly this guy is writing for the next like 10 minutes or something. So a lot of writings have happened while I'm traveling, while I'm living, you know. There's a philosopher who beautifully says, it's vain to sit down to write when you haven't stood up to live. Because when you stand up to live, that is when writing comes, when thinking comes. And by the way, even in sciences and other disciplines that are not related to creative writing, living, experiencing life can give you insights, because especially now more than ever, we live in an age where you're not just specialized in one thing, that knowing a lot about a lot of different things can inform your exact field, no matter what that field is. And that's why I think this is important to consider. Also, there are no same slide. There are no shortcuts to becoming a writer. Practice is key. If you want to be a good pianist, you have to play a lot of piano. Good runner, you have to run a lot. You have to be good at a vocational skill. Good carpenter, you have to work a lot with wood. And that goes exactly for writing. And lastly, writing is a craft. It is a full-time work. It's not a luxury only. And this is something very important for you to internalize, whatever writing you do, whether you do technical, academic, creative, or a combination. I would say I do a combination, because I write poetry, I've written a book on social science, I write articles on different social critique, and then I work for a university where I would say, more professional writing, or closer to sometimes professional writing. And so you have to navigate that and know, but the thread of creativity can really nourish all of them together. And that's exactly a point I'm going to continue to emphasize. Don't think that you should separate, or you should kill the creative writing to nourish the technical. It's okay to bring them together. because we humans, we are healthier and we produce better when we are holistic. We are seen as complete, and when we operate and function as complete holistic humans. So next slide. Sorry, the next one. Here we're going to talk about the 4 main types of writing. A reminder, these are more the standardized English forms of writing, which means that in other cultures, in other languages, we have even more and different ways of writing. For example, I remember when I first started writing in English, people often said, your writing is so beautiful and poetic, but it's very long or very flowery. I've been told that at the beginnings. But that's because Arabic expresses a lot. It's a language that have more than 12 million words, where English has closer to 4 million words, right? And so there's a huge difference. So your language, a way of expressing, can be very different than English or than French, and so on. And that is important. And that is not something you should kill. It's something you should nourish. And the more you speak languages, the more you can bring those worlds together to give a unique view in writing. So my point is, there is no one way of writing. There is no one correct way of writing. And certainly the English rules are not the only rules in the world. And this is what it means to also decolonize and do the dice, the combination, and use all your languages. I love the saying that goes that, tell me how many languages you speak and I'll tell you how many persons you are. Because every language you speak gives you a whole different world. It opens doors. It's key to a lot of doors. And that is exactly what a writer needs. The more worlds you're exposed to and able to capture, the more meaningful your writing will be. So instead of avoiding it and being scared of it, nourish it and love it and embrace it. But this is the English standard format of the types of writing. And I think it's important, especially for of you who want to write in English, those of you who are also thinking about academic work, creative writing. So the key types are narrative. It's called narrative, which the purpose for it is to tell a story, whether the story is real or imaginary, right? And then examples include short stories, novels, presentations, of course, can be narrative, speeches, creative essays, memoirs, anecdotes, and so on. That's the first type. The second type is descriptive. And as you see in the name, you describe. The purpose of the descriptive writing is to help the reader visualize an event, a character, a place, all of these things together. Visualizing, describing is really important. And actually, it's particularly important in creative writing, since we talked about creative. And while we are moving slowly into other territories, by the way, after the types of writing. But poetry, fictional stories, journals, copywriting, this is important. Copywriting seems different than the others, but it really does benefit a lot from descriptive writing, narrative and nonfiction. There's a famous rule in creative writing. It's called Chekhov's gun or pistol. I don't know if you all know about it. If you don't, I'll just quickly tell you. Chekhov is a Russian dramatist, playwright, and writer. He's a great writer, Anton Chekhov. And he famously said, if you open a scene, he was talking about plays in this case. If you open a scene with a pistol, you're going to have to use that pistol. And that's called Chekhov's pistol. What it means that when you describe in writing, you don't just describe in a meaningless way that it has no aim and no meaning whatsoever. If you're going to tell us, so I'm going to use a funny example. If you're going to start describing a rain, somebody needs to get wet or to slip in that rain or something. Don't just describe a rain for us. And this is the very important idea in writing, especially creative, as you see in these examples, that you need to, what you describe should matter. It should tell us something. Don't only tell me, show me. Don't tell me this guy is evil. Show me, what did they do? Showing is really important. Don't tell me this woman is poor. Show me why and how is she poor. And that's descriptive, right? So going back to Chekhov's pistol, if you're going to start a scene telling me that there was a piece of dry bread on the table, at some point I'm going to want you to tell me what is the significance of that piece of dry bread on the table. And so that's what Chekhov's pistol comes from as a metaphor. Next type of writing would be and I'm still, reminder, write questions, thoughts, insights, please, at all times. Expository, the purpose of it is to expose or set forth facts. It is most common form of writing. Its purpose is to explain or educate readers about a particular topic. The goal is to teach readers about something rather than persuading or entertaining them. So it's definitely not to entertain the reader. And examples will be expository of textbooks. You'll find it in manuals, which manuals can be very technical writing, by the way. And nevertheless, you're going to still need expository forms of writing here. On how-to articles, right? How to do this, 10 steps to master this. So I think a lot of you, whatever you do, I will say either need this writing or will greatly benefit from mastering the expository writing. Because as you see the examples, technical scientific writing, editorial, even recipes, by the way, can follow a little bit that line. Training materials, frequently asked questions and pages and blogs and so on. So that's another form of writing that's important. And I think for a lot of you, we're going to talk a little bit more about this, a little bit more in depth in a moment. Next one would be persuasive. And by the way, I want to remind you again, as I speak, that there is a thread connecting a lot of these form of writings, and there is a little bit of overlap also sometimes. So that's normal and expected. And for all I know that in Benin or Zimbabwe or in Tunisia, people can still do things differently. Like you will see an article that doesn't follow exactly those rules. And that's why I began with the reminder that this is English language. It's one wonderful way to think about writing. It's not the only way, right? Excuse me. Persuasive, the purpose is to influence the reader to assume a certain point of view, including that of the author. You can persuade them. As it says, you're trying to persuade somebody. Examples will be editorials, opinion pieces in newspapers, essays, cover letters, by the way. And this is a very interesting point. When you write a cover letter to employer, you are doing persuasive. And that's why mastering it, even in a creative manner, can help you in employment. And that's where you connect creativity with a lot of different forms of writing, right? Letters of recommendations. And I've written a lot of letters of recommendations before. And when I really like the person, without even knowing it, by the way, not even intentionally, I found myself being very creative and trying to be persuasive to tell specific details about that person. Not only I think they're wonderful, why I think they're wonderful. Again, show and tell. Don't tell me they're wonderful. Show me. And this applies to your cover letters. If you write a cover letter for any employer, don't sit and tell me, I am a great biologist. Show me. I'm a biologist. I did this and this. And in this project, I succeeded in X, Y, and Z. And that's where it comes. You're doing persuasion and you're doing descriptive, right? And that's where I say there's an overlap and an intersection. Sales writing is highly persuasive also. And then also reviews and advertising. I think you got the idea here. I'm going to move to the next. What types of writing should I master? And I talked a little bit about this, so I'll be very quick. Intersection of knowledge and disciplines necessitates mastering different forms of writing. That's what I was saying earlier. So I think not only it's good to know creative writing, but to find the thread between the creative writing and other forms of writing. And that's a job that each one of you will do differently and will need a different amount of time and practice to do. But I think in today's world, it's really important to understand the intersections and to respond to them in your way of life and writing. Mastering more than one form can help you remain competitive, creative, and innovative. These words seem very big, but really, what does it mean to innovate, right? To find different functions in unexpected places. So find a solution in sometimes the least expected place to find a solution. That's innovative, right? How do you do that? You do that by being creative and by combining different skills, including different writing skills and formats. Technical and professional and academic writing are most common and sought after. I think that's not news for you all. If you're good with technical and professional, and of course, many of you will need the academic writing, especially if you're doing, any kind of education. So that's something to remember. Next thing, academic writing, I'm going to define it in a very simple way and, to demystify. And I want to remind you all again, we come from different countries and different education institutions and different education models. And for example, I studied in Iraq, the UK, and the US. They were so different. I cannot even compare. Maybe Iraq, the UK was a bit closer, Europe, Iraq, because of the influence and of course the colonial influence. The US was a whole different thing. And that's important. And so in Africa, I'm sure education institutions are different. They have different ways of thinking and writing and doing. But academic writing, at least in the Western world, briefly, refers to a style of expression that researchers use to define intellectual boundaries of their disciplines and specific areas of expertise. And that's why academic writing has its own words, its own lingo, even its own jargon, which I usually think you shouldn't use unless you really have to, and you're writing to a certain audience. So that's in simple terms what academic writing is. Next one, please. What type of, the characteristics of academic writings. What are the key characteristics? I wanted to just to put them clearly on paper in case, because many of us, especially if you're an international student or studying in an international education, sometimes you feel not very competent, and that's unfair because you have your own competency, but you hear all these conflicting ideas. Oh, this is the good academic writing. Oh, if you're not doing this, then you are not rigorous. And then you begin to lose your self-confidence. And sometimes I believe the best thing we can do if we feel in doubt, to go and look at the simple definition. What is academic writing? What does it mean? What are the characteristics of academic writing? That can demystify for yourself. And then you use your own creative way of doing a good academic writing, because there is no one way of doing it. And so formal tone, careful use of third person versus first person, because if I say I see this, I'm obviously using my own observation. If I say it has been argued, it means, and I have to maybe even cite, some researchers have researched this or argued this. It has been found, and then I might have to cite some studies. Who found what? So demystify it. It's not as difficult as it seems. Clear focus on research and the problem under investigation. And you have more precise word choice. I think the last point applies to creative writing. Don't say, oh, these words are the same. I can use this or the other. No two words are the same. Even if they're very close in meaning, they can have a very specific way of using them. And therefore, you have to be precise why you're using this word, not another. Okay, so these are some key basic characteristics of academic writing. Next thing, the purpose. What is the purpose of academic writing? To report on a piece of research the writer has conducted. So something that you've done. And this is important. I know it's obvious. You all say, oh, of course, we know, right? But it's important because I see a lot of horrible academic pieces and writings. All people do is Tom and John said this and that, and Mary said this and that, goodbye. That's not good writing. Academic writing is to do your review and to do your reading and see what others have done, but more importantly, to tell us what you are saying, what you are contributing. So a lot of academics can be very afraid sometimes and not have confidence. And you see, if you read carefully, they almost don't say anything. And it's important for you to say what you want to say. And the best way to say what you want to say is to prove to the readers that you've done your research and you've read others, and now you're saying your way. It doesn't even have to be new. Sometimes it can be a very small contribution to a lot of work that exists already, but that small contribution can change a lot of things as long as you're making a contribution. So that's it. To answer a question the writer has been given or chosen, you take a question and you pursue that question in all kinds of ways. You can do it obviously through research, qualitative, quantitative, intercross, multidisciplinary. You use different methods to find everything you can about that question. To discuss a subject of common interest and give the writer's view. To synthesize research done by others on a topic. So as you see, this is a point I already mentioned. You do synthesize research. You do show us that you've read others, but that's not the only thing you do. You show us what you have done. And that's really important if you want to be a good academic. And I can tell you again, I can't tell you how many bad academic articles and books I've read. I mean, some of them are so bad. And now I consider myself an expert. I read the first 2 pages and I know very quickly if they're making contribution or just repeating and recycling the same stuff. Sadly, there's a lot of rules in academia that make people not contribute the best they can, but I encourage you all to be doing that. If you have a dissertation or journal articles, you can have all or any of these. Now, of course, you have them when you need to have them. This is another important point. Some people think that, oh, I must have appendices, I must have images. No, it depends on the topic, the question, and your methods. Your methods determine what you need to have, and you have to be very logical about it. Remember, I said in creative writing, you write, and writing is the soul, the spirit, and it chooses the body that fits it best. And that applies to an extent to academic and even professional. You have the elements that you really need, and that's really something that you need to consider. I'm going a bit faster with this. And now I want to talk a bit about the technical writing. Technical writing, I'm defining it in simple terms. It's a writing discipline that is sometimes defined as a simplifying the complex. Something complex, you're simplifying it. That's why you're doing technical writing for the layperson sometimes to read. Technical writing involves communicating complex information to those who need it to accomplish some task or goal. It often results in relevant, useful, and accurate information geared to specifically targeted audiences in order to enable a set of actions on the part of the audience in pursuit of defined goal. It is not reserved solely for writing manuals, as some people think, by the way, manuals for computers or for software. Because of its wide range, modern technical writing is present in almost every industry or the other. So that's another thing for us to consider. And I'm reading your chat as I speak, by the way. So I'm acting like my eyes are going back and forth, and I'm loving all your beautiful comments, and we will respond to all of you. This is a bit of a longer webinar because of what we're covering. So please, I appreciate the patience and the presence. Thank you so much. But I knew that we couldn't have done this just in 1 hour, so I wanted to give it a bit more time, but we're getting close to this. So, you know, and I thought to give it its justice, it would be good to give you all the time that you need, you know. So now we're going to talk about considerations. There are 5 key considerations for technical writing. The first one, structure your writing. You need to pay attention to the structure if you write technical. It's usually conventionally hierarchical in structure. So writing is hierarchical. What does that mean? You will ask me, right? If it is arranged as a cascade of sections or chapters, the parts are arranged usually in the same hierarchical manners as a high level of abstraction, which is composed into sections of greater detail. You begin with abstract, with a certain, you know, more abstract sections, and then you get into the details, into the subsections. So each at an intersecting level or detail. The composition of writing in this fashion is used to help organize and convey ideas. You basically, in technical writing, you go from high level to low level. High level, you can be more abstract, and then you begin to elaborate in the sections and subsections. That's what I mean when I say it's hierarchical. So that's why it's abstract to the detail. Position your writing, which means this is critical, this point. Know your audience. In technical writing, it's really important to know who are you writing for, and what will they need to know, and what do they possibly know, and even what kind of questions they might have. So knowing the audience is a key in technical writing. Choose your words carefully. We talked a lot already, sorry, not a lot, but already, about the conciseness of language and why it matters. Excuse me. You know, for example, in Arabic, sometimes you have 5 words that mean a close thing. Some average person will say they mean the same thing, but they don't. And that's what I mean to be concise. And that's important in technical writing, in any language you do it, whether English, French, or any other language. So you must fully understand your intended readers and prepare to align your work accordingly. Different writing tones and approaches are needed for customers. So if you're writing for a customer, it's not going to be the same as you write for a vendor. And this takes technical writing, right? if you're writing technical versus non-technical people who are going to read it. And both of them will require technical writing, but you may have a technical reading or a non-technical reader, sorry. Government agency versus other entities, NGO. Again, there's difference, right? So deciding your audience as early as possible in the process of writing is key. It will reduce a lot of rewriting effort and unnecessary confusion as you do this. Universal and existential quantification. This is another characteristic of technical writing. And I want to remind you, some of this stuff applies. It could also intersect with academic and professional writing, just as a small reminder. And that's why I want you to pay attention to this and try to see how in your head, in your work, you could connect them in different ways. So what does it mean to say universal existential quantification? Example, in mathematical and engineering writings, we use symbols to represent concepts of universality and existence. So of course, if you're writing for an engineering or math audience, you will be dealing or using those symbols. And that's a very big characteristic. And the last one, these are 5, and there are more, but these are, I did some research, these are the most important. Use positive forms of declarations, directions, and instructions rather than negative. And, you know, I think that's kind of clear. Technical or professional versus academic writing, they have 3 key differences, but again, they may sometimes overlap. The reason why I still put them together, despite the possibility of overlapping, so that you just get a sense, you get a visual of where they might differ. Technical focuses, or professional focuses on providing detailed information about a product or a service. Academic focuses on providing theory or viewpoint in one way or the other and emphasizes a specific subject and deals with other literature. Technical professional contains factual, neutral, and impartial content. Academic can have the same. This is where the intersection is. But also, academic contains contents on a specific discipline or field. The field and the discipline in academic writing can be much more specific and even limited in some ways than the technical writing. But again, the academic could also be factual, neutral, impartial, and sometimes it could also be a viewpoint based on observation and factual or impartial. But you have to make a point to say why you make that point. And you could say, I argue, right? You say that in academic writing. I argue, but it's based on something. The third key difference, technical, professional is subject, it can be subjective or personal viewpoints. Subjective or personal viewpoints are not included in it. And as I just said, in academic, it can be included, although you have to defend it. So for example, you say, I argue that everything that has been said about this topic is such and such, and I argue so because, and then I'm going to give you reasons of what work have I done, what research, what methods have I used to argue that, right? And then you can also argue against a viewpoint, which could be your personal take against the viewpoint, but that personal viewpoint can also be based on a lot of research and methods. So I hope that explains it, and it just gives you a sense of how these might sort of overlap, but also divert in certain ways. The next thing, and I promise we're getting close, my friends, writing. So writing as a process or the process of writing. Now, I put these together. They don't apply to every piece of writing and to every form of writing. So you might be writing a poem, an essay, a manual, a technical piece, whatever you're writing. These are important elements, and they may, at least in part, at least several of them apply. And I thought I'll put them together because, again, the idea of what does it really mean to have a process? We hear it, everybody. Writers advise you to have a process. This person says you need to put a process. Even when you sit to write a dissertation or a big research, they'll tell you need to have a process. And sometimes you feel confused. What do they mean? So in basic terms, in simple terms, you brainstorm. You brainstorm the questions, what you're interested in, what matters, and where to go, and how to find it, what are the methods, what literature to read. You research, including stuff you brainstormed, and you can do the research piece at any given time, because you're going to continue to want to learn new things about what you're doing. Drafting, revising, and editing, and then publishing, depending on your goal, if publishing is the goal. Again, publishing may not be the goal. So I'm just putting these together. So research, you draft, and be prepared to draft a lot. It's very healthy to draft a lot. I love the saying that the writer's best friend is the trash bin. That's when we didn't have the laptops. The saying was said that you keep throwing drafts in the trash until you get to what you want. Again, going back to the dice, if you're writing creative writing, I go through a lot of edits, throwing the dice, coming up with the exact combination that I want. And that's very important. And then editing. And editing is you, but you can never be your only best editor. I highly recommend that you find trusted people that you respect academically, intellectually, spiritually, depending on what kind of writing you're doing, and get some help with editing, because another set of eyes, 3 sets of eyes, more and more eyes can make a huge difference. Don't overdo it and do not overestimate it. There was a time when I didn't have much support. I was my only editor. It did help me a lot to improve my editing skills, but I also learned it's really important to have an editor. Like it can help you a lot. You never know what the other person sees. Your writing is so familiar to you that you don't sometimes even see a typo. Another person might notice that. So I do recommend it. Publishing is a whole different world. And honestly, if I want to talk about it, especially my experience, I've published in different places, different countries, Lebanon, UK, and so on. And online, a lot of online publishing also. So publishing might need its own webinar. But for those of you interested in publishing, you do need to take that step seriously and read about and don't be discouraged and say, oh, nobody will publish me. I encourage you to change that mindset and say, the question is not whether I'll be published. The question is, who is going to publish me? When you change the question, you're changing the mindset and you're changing your spirit. You have a stronger spirit. The question is, who's going to publish me? Now, of course, granted, you've done a good work and you've worked hard, but you say, I'm going to look for a publisher who's interested in this. And it's a long process. Sometimes it can be a bit exhausting, but definitely worth it if you want to put your voice out there. And I do recommend it for you to explore. Those of you who are interested in exploring, you can message me and we will talk more about it if you have any questions about it. And be careful. I want to say this quickly about scamming in the publishing world. People who will ask you for money. For example, good academic journals almost never, as far as I know, will never charge you to publish your work. They will put you through a rigorous process, peer review, and they don't charge you. So be careful with a lot of scams in the publishing world with places that are terrible. And I want you to be aware of that. A good publisher takes you seriously. They may not pay you, but they will not take money from you. For example, with my book, is a very respected publisher. They didn't pay me, but they took my book. I mean, because, certain books sell with a certain amount. If you're writing social science versus a very big, book about how to be happy in your marriage, for example, of course, one will sell more than the other, right? And so that's important to consider. But a good publisher will not charge you money. Remember that. Top qualities of good writing. I call them the 5 C's, only because we're speaking in English. Maybe you have 5 T's and 5 R's in another language that you speak, and you have your own list, and that's totally fine. But those qualities definitely apply to academic, technical, professional to a certain extent, or maybe to a great extent. Some of them do apply to creative writing. Correctness. Being correct shows how serious you are, how seriously you take with that. Clarity. Don't assume that, oh, readers will know this. I don't need to say more. But also don't overdo it. Clarity is a very difficult dance. It's a very hazy area. Clarity, ironically, is not clear to many people, right? So how to be clear? It's a very, very gentle dance. So be careful with that and be clear where you really need to be. And how does a writer know how to be clear? I think it's by living. The more you live and observe and engage with people, it becomes clear to you what people are thinking and why they say this. And they're saying this without really critically thinking about this. So if I write about A, I have to emphasize B. In therapy, there's a beautiful rule. They say, if you send a message A and I receive B, the message is B. And so it's very important for the sender of the message to craft it so that it gets as clear as possible to the other person. Completeness, of course, especially in certain kinds of writing. Creative writing has different rules or even no rules of completeness, but others do. Consistency, particularly in technical, professional, you have to be consistent, and actually very much for academic. And changeability. Changeability is important. I want to talk more about this particular one because everything else is a bit clearer and I can answer questions, but it's particularly relevant for technical writing and in some cases academic writing. According to academic writing, a practical guide by Philip Laplante. This is a book that I'm going to share with you. It's in the slide. I'll quote the writer. A document is changeable if the structure of the document will readily yield to modification. So changeability means you create a document that is easy to modify if needed, because when you write certain kinds of writing, modification is important, especially with technical. You might need to modify based on, things that you missed or new facts that emerged and so on. So I'll read more from the book. Usually this means that the document is numbered, stored in convenient electronic format, and compatible with common document processing and configuration tools. It is obvious why changeability is an important quality of any technical document. The contents will change as errors, omissions are identified. Ease of modification will also reduce costs, assist in meeting schedules, and facilitate communication with respect to any projects that are associated with the technical documentation in question. Reviews and inspections, this is another point, reviews of others and inspections of others of your document are the most obvious ways to assess the document's modifiability. So when others review a document, then that gives you a sense of how modifiable it is. So I hope this explains the changeability part is very important, especially for technical writing, I would say. But quite honestly, I found this important even when I wrote my dissertation. Having a document that's easy to navigate and modify. My doctoral dissertation was 440 something pages, right? And I needed to modify and navigate and move from sections easily in the document, but also allow that to my committee who was going to read it. So that changeability helped a lot in applying it. But I would say it's very, very applicable to technical writing. Avoiding classical traps, so avoid cliches which are the same things. For example, making the world a better place. How many people have said this? Or love is blind. Oh my gosh, is this new? Are you gonna, win the prize of the best poem in the world by saying love is blind? And on and on. And there are many cliches. I'm being a bit funny here, or maybe not. Maybe you don't like my humor, that's okay. But avoid cliches, saying the same things that everybody has said. As I was saying earlier, use even if you have to use common language or common words, it's totally fine. Use it in an uncommon way. And that's possible, right? So one quote that comes to mind is from a philosopher who says, common sense is not so common. So he took the same word common in common sense, and they told us it's not so common. So that's a way of this. So be disruptive in writing, especially creative. You can be disruptive. People are expecting something, and then you immediately disrupt what they expect with something more creative, more innovative, something different. So cliches to be avoided, my friends. Anthropomorphic writing, which means projecting human feelings, behaviors, or characteristics upon animals, inanimate objects, or systems. Something to avoid. Malapropisms is a word that sounds similar to an intended word, but is logically wrong. So, like a word that sounds like another word, but it's actually the wrong word. Words that sound like each other. We definitely have those in English, but sometimes they could create more confusion and make your writing look terrible. So it's called malapropisms. Erroneous heterographs, which means two words are heterographs if they sound the same when they're pronounced, but they're spelled differently, right? And have different meanings. For example, complement and complement. Complement with, L-I-M-E-N. ENT, and to complement something. One thing complements the other. They sound different. They sound exactly the same in pronunciation, but they're different writing. So that's another trap, by the way. Many people fall in that trap, believe it or not. And then opinion versus facts. You have to be very clear about that. I think that's very clear to probably most of you here, all of you. I don't need to say more about that, but be very careful and clear about that. Say, I believe, I argue, or say, scholars have argued, or say, the company has designed this device to do X, Y, and Z. This is a fact, or this is a fact from the company. And you see the difference is very obvious. Don't say, I believe this device is supposed to do this and that. If you're doing technical writing, you would say, the device has been designed by the company so that, and then you take the exact facts about the device. So this is important. Acronyms, domain, specific terms, and jargon. And I said this because that's part of clarity, but also, acronym, when you say, for example, you say, I'm trying to look for an example that is very clear. Let's say, I say, I'm doing medicine. UTI is common in women. Well, don't just start with UTI. If you're writing for an audience, UTI means urinary tract infection. Always spell out in the first mention. This applies a lot to English, not all languages. For example, in Arabic, you can't do that. In Arabic, you have to spell everything, right? And in other languages too. But English has a lot of those, abbreviations, acronyms, and so on. If you tell us the UN, you got to tell us the first name. It means the United Nations. If you tell us NAFTA, spell out what NAFTA is, and so on. So, and jargon, avoid it as much as possible, especially with specific audiences. Don't use very in a lazy manner. Very doesn't work very well. If I say unique, is already, the meaning is already captured. This is unique. It means it's one of its kind, not something you see a lot. There's no need to say very unique. It's actually incorrect, even linguistically. So be careful with very. In creative writing, don't sit there and just say very beautiful, very ugly, very evil. First of all, show me and respect the meaning that is in the word itself. If I'm saying beautiful, there is enough beauty in beautiful. I don't need to say very. So be careful with very. That's an example, the lazy very. Very unique, I gave you that. Wise, we say clockwise. We say likewise. Nice to meet you, likewise. This is in English. But some people will continue saying, how are you health-wise? How much is left time-wise? And this is actually incorrect. They're just using wise, taken, grammatically, something used in specific case, applying it to every word, and so on. As a writer, you need to be careful about that. It's about precision, clarity, and good writing. And I would love to hear examples. If you can think of any pitfalls, please share them in chat with us. And then I close with, no matter how beautiful language is, especially, and this is a creative closing, of course, because creative writing is very meaningful to me. And I imagine it is to you. That's why you're here. No matter what we say, language remains incomplete. No matter how we say, there's always shortage. And that's why living will continue to nourish language and give it life. And there is no end to this. And as long as we're humans, we are imprecise, incomplete, incapable of truly capturing the depth and the complexity. But we keep trying, and we will keep trying. And we try sometimes through silence. And silence speaks to us also. It gives us language that we could not hear in the middle of a lot of noise. So even silence is its own language, and it needs to be respected. And sometimes silence is a break. You take a break to think and reflect and see what this means to you. And I read here a poem from Rumi, the beautiful poet. He says, this is how it always is when I finish a poem. A great silence comes over me, and I wonder why I ever thought to use language. Of course, Rumi was a poet, and he used language, and he wrote beautiful poems, right? But he tells us this to remind us that no matter what you say, you always come to a point when you're done and say, the language was inadequate. There's more I wanted to say and I couldn't say. And that's why we keep living and experiencing life through ourselves and through others until we find the words, that dice combination that the writer Doris Lessing tells us about. And so I hope that this was something that meant something to you. I put my heart and soul in every word, because I know that the kind of people who come here, they deserve nothing but the best. And this is the least that I can do. So we open it to questions, and thank you so much for listening and for staying. I really, really appreciate it. And we're going to go to questions. I'm going to have my colleague, Tiffany, kindly help with navigating questions.
Louis, that was fantastic. You can
Thank
definitely
you.
sense the passion in your voice, and I know everyone else can feel the same. Since we just have about 7 minutes, I'm collecting the emails that people are posting in the chat. So one quick question is will we get the slides via email? Are you will it be possible to provide the slide deck?
And yeah, so I'm open. So what do we have for questions? I see a lot of questions. Thank you so much, everybody, for the kind words. And I'm happy to stay in touch. Tiffany, what is the best way for our audiences to be in touch with me if needed? For questions?
We can post your email address here,
yeah.
which I will do. Okay, I will.
I kindly ask all of you to fill the post-webinar survey, because the questions in it help us design next webinars. And I'll be giving a series of webinars in the spring. So I would love to see you. But also, if you fill out these surveys, I will get to see the sense of what you need and what was important for you to do more of this kind of stuff. So please just take that into consideration. So back to my colleague, Tiffany.
Sure. We have a question from Marion. Why does it feel like sometimes I am writing the same way? Is there a problem with that? And how can I write more creatively or better?
Yes, that's a dilemma that a lot of writers go through, feeling that you're writing the same, or you're not saying something new, or your style is the same. And there is no right answer in the sense that, oh, you're wrong, you shouldn't be doing that. The answer, the best way to think about it is that writing is a practice, and you practice different forms of writing. And that's why I talked about the spirit, that let it take its own body. So when you focus too much on the body, you're going to tailor the spirit for the body, because you're only focused on the body. I want this writing to be an essay. That means if something else comes up as you discover and begin writing, then it may not be an essay material. Many people have told me your essays are very poetic, because I wasn't thinking that this should be an essay, but then it ended up being an essay, and parts of it were very poetic. The poet Baudelaire says, be a poet even in prose. Even when you write prose, be a poet. He's a poet, of course. But the idea is that you experiment and you let the soul and the spirit of what you're writing choose its body, not the other way around, and say, oh my gosh, I must write a poem, and therefore I have to stick to this and this. That's what creates much of the same. That's number one. Number two, experience. By reading more to others, but also living more. And I say, it's okay to take a break from writing if you are in the searching moment. Some break, I call it a living break, by living more, talking to people and reading more, and try to wait until another form begins to emerge. But during that break, you can still experiment without publishing with different drafts. So you have to do all of these elements to be able to. And Nana had a question in chat earlier, Tiffany.
I think I pulled all of them.
Okay,
so the next one is from Samuel, that was in the Q&A channel. What is the best type of writing for business blogging?
Business blogging, I remember when I talked about different forms of writing, and I talked about how they overlap, and I can say safely that business intersect multiple things. I mean, it will be descriptive, it will be persuasive for sure. This is what I meant when I said some of you might be more interested in creative, not so much in technical. Some of you are more technical. They say, oh my gosh, I don't want the creative. But this is what I meant when I really encourage you to find the thread in all these types. And business is a place where you do need to persuade. You do need to be creative and capture and what they call be catchy, right? But also it's a place to be factual and be honest and be ethical. And so that's very professional, technical. You say something factual, not just say, this product is going to make you 20 years younger. Like, no, that's not very ethical business if that's not exactly. So combining all of these, if you write and blog for business, you're going to need to combine this because you want to be authentic, you want to be factual, you want to be creative. So all of that is really important. I hope this answers it, but if we stay in touch, if anybody of you, I will try to answer questions even later because I know this is important for you. So, and if you come to next sessions, I'm always happy to see you, of course.
So a question from Nana, the one from earlier, can you highlight a bit on unbroken living tradition, a typical practical example of how others have been broken?
Well, I mentioned this in the context of Sumerian writing that doesn't exist anymore, the cuneiforms. I mean, because writing, evolved and then other languages emerged in the region. And the same thing applies to the Mayan. I mean, the Mayan culture, basically, we have ruins of it right now. So happens recently, I was in the Anthropology Museum in Mexico City, one of the most beautiful museums that I have been to. Really beautiful. It's called the Anthropology Museum, and they have big sections on the Mayan culture and how wonderful and great it was. But those don't exist as of today. The only thing I meant that was not broken is that that language continued to this day, and it still lives to this day. It continued to organically stay alive and evolve, and so it's considered an unbroken tradition.
We've got two more questions. This is from Samuel. How best can one do copywriting?
Copywriting, it depends on what are you doing, and I think copywriting is one of those practices that requires a lot of attention and even editing skills. And so I recommend that you focus a lot on that. And this is a good reminder because when you publish a work, you do go through a copywriting process, obviously, right? But a reminder that that certain kinds of writing, like for example, editing and writing are not the same thing. And it's a big bonus if you're a writer and a good editor, which editing comes with certain skills and certain practices of attention and language and grammar and so on and so forth. And so that a good writer is not necessarily a good editor, and a good editor is not automatically a good writer, although good editors, because they do it a lot, they become familiar with a lot of exposure. And same thing with copywriting. This exposure to a lot of it and the detail is the key of mastering it, I would say. There's more to say, but this is just the basic quick answer given the limited time we have. I'm happy to stay a few minutes later because we went a bit over, and I would like to honor your questions to the best way possible.
Thank you, Louis. There's one more question from Claire. How can one write a good motivation letter, for example, when applying for a scholarship?
The scholarship is a different game than writing for career if you're applying for jobs. And this is really important. I have a whole webinar on scholarships. And if you guys want, we can try to have it again at some point. So fill out the survey and let us know if this is important for you, the attendees. But let me say this. Scholarship, the writing for scholarship motivation letter, they're usually called research statement and personal statement. Some only have a research statement, some have both, and some have just a personal statement with the understanding that when you're writing a personal statement, you're also telling us what you want to research. You combine both. So be careful. If you see in any scholarship just research statement, you can combine the person and the researcher. Not being personal and telling them my favorite food is this and my favorite hair color is this. No, being personal and why are you the right person for this department, this question, this scholarship. That's what it means. If you have research statement and personal statement in the same scholarship application, it means you talk separately about the person and the scholar that you are. Yeah, why you are the scholar, why you want to pursue this field, what makes you the person, what experiences you have to be. And then in research, you talk about exact questions. These are my questions, and I'm interested in them because, and I'm aware of scholarship. You mentioned briefly, what scholarship are you engaging with? Which scholars are you engaging with? And so that makes really good letters and significantly increase your chances of getting scholarships. And again, we can talk more about this if people would like to express this in the post-webinar survey and tell us more, because I have a whole webinar created for scholarships, and if there's a desire, we can talk about it.
Okay, we have a couple more that came in.
Sure.
Any tips on the art of writing for a cover letter?
The biggest tip for a cover letter is not to repeat your CV on the cover letter as many people do. That's the biggest tip. Number one. Number two, if you do say things from your CV, say them with a different light and a bit more detail. Think of the CV as a formal way of telling them, and the cover letter as a personal, persuasive way of saying that I did this and it's important because of this and that. And make sure the cover letters are not too long and they do justice to the work that you've done before, and not only repeat what's on the CV, as I said, but also show you what as a person doing that job. Give them a feeling of you, and talk a little bit about the company. Why is this job and this company the right place for you to be? That's where the cover letter, because this is the very first communication you often have with the hiring people, and they want to see what are your values and why are you the person and why are you choosing them. And you can be very authentic and honest about saying, I love this job, I'm interested in this company because X, Y, and Z.
Louis, just as a follow-up, there's always a question of how personal or how informal you can be with the cover letter, kind of going off of the, the
Yes.
very professional tone of a
Yes.
CV. What are your thoughts on that?
This is a very good question, and thank you so much for saying that. Basically, let me say, sadly, a lot of people out there, they mistaken the personal, when they say personal statement in scholarships or being personal cover letter, they mistaken that for being really personal and telling them, I like rap music, or I like, it's okay to be personal, but whenever you're personal, it should show you as a person doing this job, as a person, as a human in this profession. You're a doctor, you are an engineer, and the personal means to show them as a person who is this engineer, how he does that. What is your special touch? But personal does not mean, spending a lot of time talking about, like your favorite hobbies. You can say one little quick line to show them you are a person, but don't spend the whole paragraph about why you like a certain kind of music. Or definitely, don't get more personal than it should be. The personal should show you as a professional. The professional should also show you as a person. It's a very careful, gentle dance. It's definitely not being too personal. And definitely not sitting giving opinions about the kind of people you like and all. So this is really important to be able to do that.
Okay, we have a few more questions. I love the one that Augustine just posted. First from Ibrahim, how does one become a good technical writer?
I tried to give you the best tips that I think are important to consider, but also, if I want to be, let me see here. Give me 1 second, because I think, where is this, the book? Because there's a really good book that I would like you to read. It's called, here, I'm going to put it in chat. This is a really, really good book about technical writing, and I recommend you read it. And I think it's available for free online. Sorry, let me put it in chat. This is a really good start, because I could easily tell you a million things and I tried to summarize, but this is a fantastic book, Technical Writing, a Practical Guide. It's by Philip LaPlante. If you're able to read this book, it has a lot of ideas and a lot of cases. It's an incredible book with a lot of cases on every detail. He talks about how to make you a good technical writer. He gives you a lot of case studies and examples and show you exactly what is wrong with the example, what doesn't work, what works really good, and it gives you different versions. So I highly recommend this book for those of you interested in mastering technical and professional and kind of entering that door, which is really important, I know, for a lot of you.
Excellent. Thank you, Louis. Any tips on the steps to publishing my work as in a book?
Well, it will depend on the work and its breadth. And I tried to give some quick tips when I was talking. I would say the question that you should ask, of course, you should do all your homework, which means you should have a really good manuscript, a really good draft. it should be logical. It should be put together well. Make sure you have an editor, you know, even before sending it to a publisher. I recommend, even if you pay a little bit for an editor, I know not all of us have the money, of course, I understand that. But if you, or find somebody you respect and trust to read and give you feedback, all these tips can help before you even begin sending it. And then, as I told you, your mindset to be really, have a powerful mindset. Don't say, am I going to get published? Say, who is going to publish me? And that means you sit and look at publishers and see what are they publishing, who's publishing stuff really close in your area, the kind of books you like, even sometimes the kind of angle, you know, the kind of, you know, so for example, if I write about war and refugees, some places publish places about refugees as if we need to save them, and, you know, in a very colonial way. But some places will have a very critical work about how refugees are produced, you know, how to stop refugees because we need to stop wars first, a critical angle. So of course, I'm going to choose the other publisher because that's closer to my work, right? And I'm giving you this example. It's close to the work that I do, but also to show you that sometimes a publisher can be close in your area, but have a very different angle, an angle that doesn't necessarily suit you. And if you want to take your work out there, you look at publishers who are close, who might honor. And the last piece, which is extremely important, like a scholarship, for every publisher, you're going to need a book proposal. And every publisher have their own format. Some can be longer. I wrote an 18-page book for book proposal. And I had several publishers, but I got my #1 choice, the one I really liked, because I designed the original proposal for the one I liked. And then I used it for others. And so the one I liked took the book because I really liked them. I really saw myself fitting with their books. So this is something you need to do. I don't know your area, but I hope this helps you, Emilia.
Great advice. And Augustine, hopefully still with us, has the $1 million question for you, Louis. Any tips to easily keep key authors' names in mind for citations, and how do you remember all of these quotes?
Yeah, this is a very good question. And the answer is a bit, you know, it's simple, but not easy to do. Simple in the sense that you do the note-taking and keep track. And then you keep track in places where you know how to easily go retrieve and pick the things that you need. So for example, for me, I'm giving you my example, personal example. I hope it helps people. A number of years ago, a while ago, actually, as soon as the laptops became familiar, like, you know, usable everywhere, being used, sorry, I digitalized my life. I started reading a lot of PDF books. I started taking notes electronically and saving them in more than one place, so that if my laptop fails or my flash disk fails, I have more than one version. And digitalizing allows you to highlight, to go to the exact page. You can enter a PDF and write, for example, oh, I know this author said something about death as a way of life. I remember they said, to live, you need to die. Let me see. And then the PDF, you go and look and it comes up and you know the exact page, you have the author and so on. So that's one way. So digitalizing for me helped me greatly to look for page numbers, exact places in the book and so on. And then there are other free websites online where you could go and create references in any style you want, Chicago style, Harvard style, and I don't know what style you use in your university, it might happen, but you go there and put all your references. You do it as you go, and then you generate a reference list at the end. It's very easy, and you can add it to your dissertation, to your research. That helps you a lot instead of sitting one by one, last name of the author, the year, quotation, the title. I need to go and do this in italics. They do it all for you in one website. I don't remember the name of the website off the top of my head. I don't want to give it wrong, but just go and type in Google websites for citation creation websites, or creating citation or reference list websites. And there are free. You create an account and you enter as you go. So that's a way for an easier way for references. So I hope this helps.
Those are all of the questions that have been posted.
I am very happy we covered your questions, and thank you so much, everybody. I'm so happy to see you all stayed with us to the end. And I'm sorry we went a bit over time. And it was really a pleasure to be with you today. I hope we meet again in different webinars. And I wish you all the very best. And we will stay in touch. Thank you so much.
You and I will break